Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Garber here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering current events on this year, Thursday morning, rise and shine and give God the glory. And this morning here, I'm looking at the topic, irrational violent outburst of young men. Irrational violent outbursts of young men. This is our current events conversation this morning we're having here, our talk, our study. So welcome. Hopefully it'll bless the night rest and ready to take on the challenges and take some opportunities that lie your way or comes your way this morning. So welcome again and thanks for joining me. Let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, I thank you again for the blessings of your word, and I thank you, dear Lord, for the strength and the victory that you give to us. May you bless me, dear Lord, and bless those who are listening as we look into this very important topic for these days, for Christ's sake. Amen. So I'm sharing with you this thought here, the irrational, violent outbursts of young men. And so we are seeing much of this in our society. A lot of what we see in society is simply to me, just the irrational, violent outbursts of young men. And I believe most of this is linked to mental health, mental illness. Not health, but illness. And this is what we're seeing. And often when we look at some of these violence, no matter what the community is, one thing we can notice is that not all of it, but most of it, when it's very rational, not like, just, people just murdering people, and there might be some seemingly provocation, but at the end of the day, we're seeing much of this in the society. And one of the things is the mental instability. Now, I know sin brings on mental illness because you have to be mentally ill to, it is a level of mental illness to believe a lie, either purposefully or by accident. And so it tells you to believe something that is a falsehood as it is true, and it make you look at truth as if it is falsehood. So that's in itself is mental illness. So I understand that there's a certain level of violence that we see in the society that I believe is normally there and always will be there. People are always going to lie and steal because of various different misguided or misplaced choices in life or aims in life, and they're going to choose to do certain things because they want to accomplish certain things. And so we see this. So murder always has been there in society. But I believe what we're seeing more and more in the last few decades, as I look back at history and try to understand what was life like before I got here and how things have changed, is that what we're looking at is some of this outbursts are people who have lost literally control of their minds to a degree that is, I would say, is clinical. And so mental health is a major cause of these violent outbursts we are witnessing in young men. We see whether it be the mass shooting or the gang violence or the gang banging or these just violence of outbursts where people just go in and wipe out their whole family. These are happening, and I believe one of the major cause for this is the mental instability in the society. Now, it is said that 1 in 5 young adults, 1 out of every 5 is affected by mental illness. And this manifests itself in many different ways. And so that's normally the number. Now, that number, I believe, is low. I personally believe is low. Now, this is what the experts are saying. So I'm saying what experts are saying. Just like I remember a few years ago, certain diseases I was saying, I think the numbers are low, and they end up coming out that they think they're under surveying and analyzing the number. I think the number for mental illness amongst people in general is way higher, than what they're giving out. And so that's basically what I believe is a lot of it. Because as I say, mental illness in its generic sense is that when we're on the sin, we're not right mentally. Our brains are twisted. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about even deeper. That the person's, if you would really go through the process, there's many people who are not on medication. They're not on the formal therapy or doctor's treatment or a psychiatrist or psychiatric evaluation or treatment, never been evaluated, that is not in full control of their mental status. That's what I'm saying. And that is something that I've, from my observation, not from a point of view of the numbers, just what I'm reading. I'll give you two examples, just in case you think I'm just, I never talk off just my head like that. Number one, the amount of people that self-medicate is way higher than the amount of people that goes through the system. So that's the number one, right? The amount of people that self-medicate. People self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, with marijuana, with various different drugs to try to solve their problems. They try to self-direct their care. There's many people today who are regular users of marijuana that are not in full control of their brains. And that's number one. And then you have the other problem where some people they basically kind of go through life where they operate at a lower level, but they're not in full control of their brains. So I'm not talking about somebody that's have the depression here and there. I'm talking about a person who's almost permanently in a depressing state, but they do never go to the doctor. All right. So that's not my burden to bear. My burden to bear is like, I've been noticing, and I covered last week, there was a mass shooting in New Zealand. And then in between here and there have been so many things going on in the news. And every time a news report happened, like I think early in the week, there was a report of a rapper out in California who got shot. And the moment he got shot, I thought the person who shot him has mental illness. And I would be surprised that the person who shot him went to prison. Because a large percentage of the prison population, I think they say over 50-something to 60-something%, have been evaluated for mental health drugs. Large percentage, a good percent of the prison population has been on some type of drug for ADD, ADHD. And so a lot of the men in prison have some problem with control of their brain to some level or the other. And so when you're in that type of environment or community, there's a large percentage of men that have been incarcerated. And they were either incarcerated because they could not control themselves from the juvenile years, or they end up in the system. The system had to control them because they, like a buck, when a buck is going buck wild, you got to try to tame it down. And we have chemicals to tame it, but some of these chemicals have side effects as mental illness. Look it up. So you will see that a large percentage of the men in prison have been tamed, or they went in there on taming drugs. And you'll see that information there. So that's why my topic is the irrational, violent outbursts of young men. It is irrational. It's not something that you can say, okay, this makes sense. And I understand crimes always exist. But the level of crimes we're seeing where there's young people just going into places and just blowing it away and just killing a whole bunch of people without no rationale to it. A lot of what we call thug violent behavior, when you kind of deal with some of these young men, you realize very quickly that they're not too in control of their faculties. Their minds have basically shot. They've lost their minds. And so that's important. In Proverbs 25, verse 28, it says, he that had no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. So he that have no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is just broken down, that had no walls, no protection. It takes nothing to set the person off. There's no limits, there's no bounds. A lot of what we see, even some of what we will see as people being like promiscuous and acting as if they have no self-control and they're dogs. Some of that has to do with mental illness also. It's just a lot of these things were never diagnosed. You think about it, even 2 decades ago, there would be behavior that people would manifest that somebody would think the person is just being difficult. And all it is that it was just the person was having Alzheimer's. And the person, as an old person, they're acting difficult. And the nurse's aide, the nurse, the people who run the nursing home or the care facility just can't get around it. And a few decades ago, that would just be viewed as, the person is just being, difficult to deal with every day. But then they say, wait a minute. And somebody say, no, no. These are all the classic signs of somebody having dementia, Alzheimer's, and they start to act very aggressive. Why? Because the frontal lobe of the brain is the first part that goes. And the front part of the brain start to fall apart first. And then the more I don't want to say animalistic, but the instinct part of the brain, just the natural flow without the intelligence, still is functioning in the back of the brain. So the person starts to act a certain way, fight or flight. And that would be interpreted how many years ago as difficult to deal with. But then when you start to think about it, you say, wait a minute. But when a person having sort of mental problem, the first part of the brain that goes is the frontal lobe. Also, when they put certain drugs like Ritalin and so forth, from my study of them, if I remember clearly, if I don't, then I will always correct myself if I get the information. The Ritalin, what it does, it is a mental straitjacket. In the past, they used to put people in straitjacket, and then they figure out if you cut the front part of the brain and shut the function down, then a person will be like in a mental straitjacket. They'll be able to hear what you're saying and so forth, but their movement will be limited. But wait a minute now, if you hit the front part of the brain, that's the part of the brain that takes care of decision making. And so some of these people, it is what's happening there, and do pardon me if I say some of these people, which I'll try to work on that, but do not say that. But anyhow, so when we deal with patients, people who should be patients, who should be on a serious care, what it is that some of these drugs that they've taken over the years have damaged the front part of their brain, the part of the brain that make executive decisions and make moral decisions. And so their strength of rationalizing their behavior becomes limited. If you think about every single mass murder we've talked about here, almost all of them, the person was either having a mental difficulties and problems before the event, or they were on some type of psychotropic medication. If you look at what the drugs does, part of what it does, it weakens the ability to make that type of decision. And I'm not blaming the drugs, because if you've ever been sick, your ability to make executive decisions weaken. Your moral fortitude becomes decreased when you're sick. And so when you think about this is the part that is most affected by also alcohol. You become impaired, but your impairment is not necessarily that you don't feel fight or flight, is your decision making. So when you look at case after case, and you always try to wait a few days for the events to come up, but before it come out, always make a call, because just from what I'm seeing, I'm like, yeah, it looks like the telltale sign of somebody that's lost their mind. And the person that shot up the rapper, if you look at it, he's been in prison. He was, the initial report, probably something that has come up, but what I saw initially, when they came up with who he is and a little profile, you see that he was locked up for mental health problems. And you find a lot of this is what's going on in society. And just young men that are not thriving. And here's this tough part of it. And I have to deal with this also in ministry. You go to a 16, 17, 18-year-old and you say, don't use that marijuana. It will damage your brain. They could see all these people who are damaged around them. They just, it's so hard for them they think that you're trying to rob them of some good experience. They can't see themselves messed up a year, 10 years, 20 years from now. They don't see that thing wrecking the brain. So that young man think, yeah, I'm going to do that. Not thinking, no, I'm dummy. I'm burning, I'm lighting something, I'm burning and inhaling smokes. That thing damaged the brain sometimes permanently. So he that has no rule over his own spirit is like a city that's broken down. This is a lot of what we see in the news today. It's simply you're looking at young men that are broken down. And they just came out of their teens. They're just in their 20s. They didn't even hit 30. And they're broken down already. They're messed up. Their brain is gone. And this is what we're seeing. And now the end result of that is you're dealing with a person who's just irrational. There's not a lot of reasoning. And I guarantee, how I look at this too, sometimes I'm reading like a comment section and I'm reading some of the things that people are saying. and they're not in full control of their mind. You can tell if you know what you're looking at and understand what they're saying. You can realize these are not rational beings, and you can decipher who is trolling and who is literally they're just not rational beings, because most of it are like trolling. In 1 John chapter 2 verse 14 through 17, 1 John chapter 2 verse 14 through 17, it says, I've written unto you, fathers, because ye have known him that is from the beginning. I've written unto you, young men, because you are strong, at least supposed to be. And the word of God abideth in you, and ye have overcome the wicked one. Love ye not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. So when you read this text, if you are young and you preserve your physical being, then this text is true. How did he say? Let me say it. He says, because you are strong, right? Young man, because you are strong. But how many people you and I know, 25, 30, and they're physically messed up. They look weak, they look beaten because of the diet, the lifestyle, the drugs, the alcohol, the things that they partake of mentally, whether it be games and movies and all that. And they've been reamed through physically and mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And yet at 25, 30, there's not much there. And you're looking at it, 21. There was a young man I saw, you probably saw him. He kidnapped this girl called Lauren, I think it was. But he was, two of them, one over here and then one over in the Midwest. Kidnapped this little girl, one of them kidnapped a little girl, kill her two parents, and had her for, I think, 80 days or something like that, 88 days. You could find it if you look for it. And I think he was 21 and she was 14. And you look at the picture of him at 21 and you realize he probably did that crime. What do they call it? Not, like his true age is probably like he did a crime at 50. That's how it looks. Probably not that bad. 40. I give him, take 10 off. And you're thinking, wow, he's like he was hitting midlife crisis at 21. And this is what's happening to her. You're not strong at all. Because it's not just a young person. And I always think about the young ones that I'm with at church. You look at the young person, you're thinking, yeah, they, give them 5-10 years, they're going to still maintain their health. Not really. Because you think about a young person coming up in society now, the diet, the social way that they're living, the food, the entertainment, everything is just basically is high speed and it's gonna mess you up fast. It's not gonna take 5-10 years into their adulthood for them to come down with cancer, for them to have mental health problems. Some of them don't even get out of their teens and they're coming down with cancers, mental health problems, digestive problem, social problems, so many problems that it pops the mind. I believe it just breaks it. And that's what's happening to our young people. And so when we see this irrational outburst, are we thinking, say, young man, what could he be going through at 20 that he needs to take it out on the world so hard? And when you look at it, you be like, okay, it's a lot. That's a lot for a person at 20 to be going through. Just a lot of pent up, rage that is coming from all that beef they've been eating with all these hormones and all these crazy chickens and all these violent video games and all these irrational drugs and all these things. And at 20, this person has lived nothing. All this white flour and white sugar and the whole thing. And you look at the person at 21, you're thinking, what happened there? How could that happen? And I'm telling you, this is how it could happen. So one thing is always was known, and I've said it in a few minutes ago, that drugs and alcohol affect the developing brains of young men in their 20s. So you want to think about it normally. I used to believe because I didn't know. So you believe what you don't know, right? You make up beliefs, in other words, or you get tidbits that are false. And probably many doctors in the past, 2 decades ago again, this is how much the information have changed. Used to believe that, by the time you come to your late teens, early 20s, you finish your development. Well, that's you finish your growth. But the brain continues to develop and mature up until in the mid 30s. That's the reality. And so the time when the brain is still developing into the teens, especially, and in the 20s, that's when normally young people experiment with drugs. And the part of the brain that, although the body physically, you go to a young man or a young girl and they think, oh, I'm mature. And why? Oh, because I finished growing and now I have an adult body. But guess what happened? That brain is still developing and maturing, and the maturity of the brain doesn't take on until the 30s. But in those years are normally years that a young person wreak havoc on the brain. You think about an 11-year-old taking drugs. How many times you've heard testimony of people who are now famous, and you look at them and look like, like vapid. They look like they're not there even in the interview. And they say, oh, at 11 I started taking drugs, even hard drugs. And now you look at them, they're like a shell of themselves. Because the brain is still developing. And as that development continues, it's continue on the duress because it's getting hit. And that's when the time of our life when we start to learn moral grounding start to comes in. We start to learn how to make moral and sensible decision. But guess when what we're doing in the 20s a lot of time is how to destroy the brain and teach it not to make moral sensible decision. So what's going on? A lot of what's going on we see is massive addiction. That's in the years when young people develop anxiety. That's when the attention deficit doesn't get better because I'm out of school and I have to sit there for an hour in class. Doesn't mean that the attention deficit problem that I never really dealt with, that just give some drugs to medicate me with, doesn't mean it's going to get better. It's going to get worse. That's when depression start to hit because now I'm an adult and I need to function. I know how to function. And I think that's why we're seeing under these violent outbursts because I don't think it takes long. Other problems that young people are facing, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating. You just think about it, 40% or so of the country is obese. Some massive numbers there. And that doesn't mean the person is obese and, they're trying to deal with this thing with fat shaming and try to, love your own body and all that. But even when they do you ever see this thing here when they do, and I'm talking about men, but let me just get onto this a little bit. But when you do this thing, because I'm going to tell you how difficult these problems are. When they do these things, when they advertise the love your own body, I think I'm getting it wrong a little bit, but it's a campaign they have going on now where you need to be happy in your own body. And then they use models that are plump, that are normally you would say they didn't get to obese yet, but they're fat. And normally when they choose these type of models, they choose models that are normally fat all over their body. That means their thigh, their midsection, their buttocks, their breast section, their arms is fat. But normally they won't choose people who basically have a concentration of fat just right about the stomach area, right? So it's still sleight of hand. I understand what they're trying to do, which is a positive thing because a lot of people are very depressed over this. But this is what our young people are facing. Antisocial behavior is some major issues that young people are facing. It's not just that people are isolated. A lot of what is being encouraged into young men, and as I say, I want to keep it at young men because that's what my topic is. But you can, deal with it for young women also, is to become antisocial. But it doesn't work. And you see, that's where a lot of the problem is. It's like you have a behavior that is being encouraged because we're trying to encourage people to be their self and love their self. But there's a certain point where you can encourage somebody to be their self, love their self, and the end result is still going to be bad. Because you're asking a person to do something that they're having a big struggle with doing. Because you could love an antisocial behavior, and yet it still lands the person in a suicide or in severe depression. Also, people having paranoia. I believe a lot of this is being pushed on by the drugs itself. Various different drugs, legal and illegal drugs. Obsessive compulsive behavior. These are things that the person needs therapy, group therapy, friend therapy, any therapy that they can get. But some of what we're encouraging nowadays in our society is what I will call obsessive compulsive behavior, where it's not just that a person has a problem. We're encouraging them that that's themselves and they need to just embrace it. They don't need to fight it, because that's normal. And what you need to go online, find other people like yourself and become part of a group that encourages it. Now, it's one thing somebody say, I'll join a group that's helping me to limit this thing. Because remember, a person that has no self-control is like a city without walls. But we're saying now, no, you need to find groups. What is society to me saying? Find groups and encourage the madness that is in you. Instead of saying, no, find a group that's encouraging you to limit that stuff and to limit that OCD, because this thing is not going to be good. Alcoholism, drug use, tobacco use. Now, again, they've limited the amount of tobacco, but a lot of young people go into vaping tobacco products, vaping THC, the thing from marijuana, the active ingredient, the psychoactive ingredient, I should say. A lot of society is depressed, having bipolar. They're up, they're down, they're all around. Social anxieties are becoming a big thing. All kind of phobias are becoming a big thing. A lot of delusions, and again, a lot of this is coming from the drugs that is being promoted as being a good thing for our young people, and other related mental illness. So a lot of this stuff is what the society is dealing with. So when I flip the news and I see people doing some all kind of irrational behavior, I first know in myself that sin always exists. All right, because I always have to ask myself the question. Okay, so is this a sign of the last day? And then I said, wait, but certain sins always exist from the beginning of time, the moment Adam and Eve sinned. Murder exists, this exists, that exists. But what is the difference, or what is the anomaly? Because people always fornicate, rape always exists. But what's going on now? And what's going on now? We see a jump in certain behavior. And I think the technology is helping it. I think the philosophy that is in society that has become more prevalent, which is to love it, to encourage it, not to fight against it. And we see just a bigger upswing in all these things. But these things are ending, as say, in violent outbursts. Notice here some of the other stuff that's going on, which to me is part of this irrationalness in young men. And part of it, I believe, is the technology that's pushing it along. Our young people, so much young men now are now in cell. And I've covered this in the past. INCEL, the involuntary celibate, right? So many young people, and I know, that they're involuntary celibate. And because they don't know how to function. They don't know how to function. They're not going to become a head of a household. And they're not going to become... and they're depressed about this. Some of them, I guess, have embraced it, and some of them are depressed about it. But they're saying it's society's fault, it's other people's fault, it's female fault. But when you interact with them, you realize, wait a minute, it's not so much about celibacy, it's so much about social behavior. Socially, they're awkward, they can't have proper conversations. They have all kind of depression and paranoia, and delusion, and what they call the obsessive compulsive disorder. It might just play itself out in video games. The social part, and is hid as in, oh, I'm probably just shy. That's not shy. That is something that needs to be therapied out. But this is part of what we're seeing in the society. So when we see this kind of irrational outburst, you have a person that has a lot of pent up emotion that they're not getting out. They don't know how to get out. They have no skills of getting it out. And so it can get out in forms of violence. You see the violence, you say, why they behave like this? I remember when I'm talking about this is in all society. Every season society, no society. When I say no society, no grouping. So it's in white, it's in black. But somebody say, oh, it's the chimps. Black people are chimping out when black people shoot up, say, other black people. But when white people do it, they say, oh, no, it's just having a mental problem. No, they're chimping out also. They're just doing white chimp, and black people do black chimp. But it's the same behavior because of the same result we're having is the same, is the same non-functional behavior in the black community, in the white community, in the Hispanic community. And we see the more the community become into this American lifestyle, is the more it falls apart because it's not a functioning lifestyle. Again, incel behavior. You check it out as a guy, you can't even relate to these guys. They don't form bonds or friendship unless it's probably over a video game. It's not like, okay, they're having a problem with female. Female is not the problem. It's just have a problem, period. They're not going to be connected to you because that's something that's been trained in. That's something that's become a mental issue. And I have guys that I go to church with that they're involuntarily celibate. They're religious, they're Seventh Adventists, blah, blah, but they can't form relationship. They don't know how to head up a household and so forth because the behavior that they extend will not help them down that part. That can lead to a lot of frustration, not because of sex, just because the mindset is not that for social. It is the social come first before any type of sexual kind of experience. But when you lose that social, then you sort of realize how important that social is, the social behavior. The same thuggish behavior, again, you find in many communities. These young men are not going to be the head of any household. They can't. They're almost animal. They're not going to be able to deal with a female and children and stuff like that. This is the reality. Mass murders. These mass murders, you look at all the cases of mass murders. A lot of time, loners, believing in some type of crazy conspiracy, have some bloodlust, same problem. Suicide bombers, same problem. It's the same problem. It's just marks itself. Because I've seen documents. You can go on YouTube, go on Vice, and go back to some of their older videos where they did, some of the reporters in like Iraq and Syria did interviewing. And you have a bream trail to information. But over the years, when I watched some of the stuff, what I'd come away with, I realized that many of these mass murderers, they're depressed. And these suicide bombers, I should say. They're literally suicidal. They're suicidal first. And then they say, well, I'm going to take this bomb. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to blow this place up. But you listen to them talk. You go watch the documentary. You see what I'm talking about. You listen to them talk. You know where you come away that that person is suicidal. It's just they're suicidal, and then they like say, okay, I'll take it. I'll strap. I'm going to blow myself up. I want to kill myself anyhow. This is not somebody looking forward to life and to a family and kids and living happily ever after. Nope. Somebody who wants to put an end to the pain. Or they have a bloodlust and it trickles up and they say, okay, I'll strap. It's important to understand it's the same thing you're looking at. It's quick to get involved with the conversation about this group or that group or that group. Because how do you go from, I'll give you an example, how do you go from being a consumer of rap music to next week say, well, I'm a jihadist, give me a bomb, I'm going to blow this place up. It's irrational. That's not a religious person. That's a mentally ill person. That's a person that has violence in their thoughts, violence in their dreams, violence all the time. And they go from that to say, yeah, I'll die for the cause. And you see that type of behavior in interview just before the person go blow themselves. And they will even show the person driving and just woof. And it's a flame of smoke. You realize, wait a minute, that person that blew himself up, how did they go from consuming, Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, consuming all this stuff from the West, and just into, but then you start to say, wait a minute, they're into violence all the time. And then they go, what? It's the same thing. Notice here, not thriving in relationship, still living with their parents in their 30s. You and I know people are like this. They're not thriving in relationship because they can't relate. And I know somebody say, but Lord, aren't there a lot of females like this? True. A lot of females will say, oh, and they'll come up with all kind of reason why they're single. But a big part of it is they can't thrive in a relationship. If you ask them, say, you have any female friends? They'll say, no, not really. I have no good female friends. They can't thrive in relationships. It's not nothing to do with not nobody wants them or they're not as sexually attractive. It's just they don't do well in relationships because they're not functioning, and they'll come up with all kind of excuse. I'm saying is that instead of coming up with this kind of silly excuse, start to deal with that problem, because that is the problem that's eating away at the society. It is, and it become happiness. Think about it. Every time you go online and look at the people who are jumping for the president, and you're going to find out that a lot of them are incels. Because again, a lot of it has to do with relationships. If you never did relationships, and you're always buying prostitutes and buying brides from the Eastern countries, you're going to do business a certain way. Because it's not about the money many times. Most of the time, probably all the time, it's about the relationship. But when you buy hookers, it's never about the relationship. So when you talk a certain way, incels will think, oh, that's so great. Because they don't understand, it's about the relationship. But if you can buy people in your life, it's never about the relationship. And I guarantee if somebody contradict me, I almost can 100% prove that they're right there at them, nipping at their heels. I know who I'm talking about. Because if you don't understand what I just said, I tell you, you need therapy. It is about the relationship. But they will say, oh no, it's about we need to be the toughest and baddest. You're silly. It's never about toughest and baddest. It's about the relationship. And if you're a Christian, you will understand that. So not thriving in relationships and still living with my parents in my 30s, that's a sign that says, where are your friends? Who are your friends? Your friends cannot be the TV. Cannot be the computer. It has to be real human beings. You got to start fixing that problem, because that leads to a lot of frustration. As a matter of fact, the little I read about the guy that I shot again, that rapper, it had said that he had gone to prison, come back from prison. He was trying to get his in the society. And the way how to get in and connect was that you have to show papers that you didn't go to prison for like child rape and all that type of stuff. And they were like rejecting him, and he took it personally and said he's going to kill them. So you think about it again. You need papers. Yeah, I mean, you either connected or you're not connected. You need to know to form relationships, or you don't. And this is some of the reasons why I'm harping what I'm harping. Because if you think that, well, what's your card? You have to have a card to be in with me or somebody else. Then that's where your problem is. It's you. I'm connected to you. I'm not connected to your degree or whatever. I'm connected to your teeth. When you smile, I'm connected to your welcoming gestures, to you happy to have me around. I'm happy to have you around. See, but when you don't understand that, you think, oh, people are connected to you because of your value, your assets, and what papers you bring and what credit you bring. No, I'm not. You don't. That's not a relationship. Our true relationships and some of our best relationships are relationships we started when we were in our teens and early 20s, when we were all broke. The friends that we have, they're just friends. They're not there because anybody had the money. Everybody was broke. But when you deal with people who, from their child, they grew up amongst money because the parents had money, and they were trained that everybody around you is there because of money. they don't know to do relationships. And that's why many of them, they have to shoot themselves in the head after they get a certain age, because they live in a messed up life, because they don't know relationships. What they know is the value that I have is because of my money. Not true. Large percentage of prisoners have mental health problem. You go look at that, you find it's way larger. I think if it is 1 in every 5 in the society has been diagnosed of mental health problem, it is, I think, 3 in every 5 in the prison have some type of form of mental illness. It's a very high percentage. So a lot of what we see as criminals, especially the ones that go back and forth prison, they're back and forth. I can't remember what they call it, where they're repeat offenders. Highest percentage of them have mental health problems. That's what's going on. They can't function at various different levels. They need serious therapy and hand holding. But what we have done now, and hopefully I can bring this full circle. What we have done in the 80s is that we had closed the mental health wards. And we said, because of the drugs that can put a person in a chemical straitjacket, because we have drugs now that can put a person in a chemical straitjacket, and we didn't need a physical straitjacket that we used to use in the 60s and so forth. We decided, look, I think under President Reagan, let's close the mental wards and release these people back into the community. They're back. They're in. And a lot of what we've seen is a result. I'm sure you just go on YouTube and you see somebody, a mad person on the side of the street, just take a person, throw them right on the bus, literally. Shove them right on the car. The car is coming, they see the car coming, they see the person walking by, and just get up and push the person, and the car run the person over. You can see this. And you say, wait a minute, what happened? Because it's not necessarily a person's on the street, they're going to take the drugs. So you could release a person on the mental health ward. Now they're on the street. But they're supposed to take the drugs. But who's going to make them take the drugs? So yes, there's a drug that can put a person in a chemical straitjacket. But they have to take it. And if they don't take it, then you could be walking by and they'll just walk up to you and start stabbing you. That is happening. That was, I think, happened even last week in one of the cases. And what's going to happen? Start punching you, start raping you. And you'll be like, this person raping you, what's going on? No, it's not this person's a rapist per se. This person is mentally ill. Because, as I say, you could, you could say, we're going to, I know they say, well, let's send them to prison now because they raped somebody. Yeah, they're in prison, and so later they have to let them back out. And they let them back out, they're on drugs, and then all of a sudden, boom, they do the crime again. And they'll be like, no, they say, let's do street strike rule. Why are you doing street strike rule? You put the person in a mental health ward. They've been proven to be mentally ill. They're not going to take the drugs. They will not take that drugs. Not on their own. They have no self-control. So no self-control will become normal. And as I said, this is a lot of what we're seeing. And there's people who today, they might seem like they're in full use of their faculties, but they're on some type of drugs. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. In our society, ignorance is bliss. 10 years of ignorance is bliss will lead to mental illness. Fake, superficial. We look at what's going on a lot in our society. People are fake and superficial, and that is applauded. That's not good. Share some Bible text with you this morning here. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 through 19. Proverbs 6, verse 16 through 19. Bible says that these 6 things that the Lord hate, yea, 7 are abomination unto him: a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speak lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. This is something that we see a lot in our society, plenty of this. And it is encouraged. It is nurtured. It's nurtured on the TV. It's nurtured in among society. And no matter what society is, when you nurture this type of stuff, the blowback is going to be terrible. And a lot of the violent, irrational outbursts that we're seeing from these young men is that they give them as you've fed, and they feed themselves a steady stream of violence, sex, drugs, no self-control, entertainment, this, that. And the cocktail that we're brewing and feeding these young men, are they brewing and feeding themselves also? We're seeing the results of it. That is why I said this is current events. You're seeing the result of it. You're seeing so many young men not functioning. Just think about the amount of young men I know personally, and I know you know them. And so much of them in their late teens, 20s, 30s, they are not productive citizens. And the cocktail that I just describe is what they're being fed day in, day out. How can that not be a violent false end? Notice here in Proverbs 1, verse 20 through 23. Proverbs 1, verse 20 through 23. Wisdom cried without, she uttered her voice in the street. She cried in the chief place of concourse, in the opening of the gates, in the city she uttered her words, saying, How long, ye simple ones, will you love simplicity? And scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. Turn at my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit up unto you. I will make known my words unto you. This is another thing also. It is like a generation of young men who curse God, reject Bible, have no respect, and the end result is not pretty for society. And the sad reality is that those who are encouraging them are getting back the beat down, I would say, from them. You think about, we glorify rock and rollers, we glorify rappers, we glorify people who are basically the rot of society, but they also are being mowed down by the mindset that they're encouraging in others. So it's a tough thing to watch, because in one hand you say, okay, who is the king of this madness? And you say, oh, these people are the king of it. They preach it. They're the closest thing to a pastor that these young men know. So you say, let's. I try not to partake too much of this stuff, but I'm aware of what's going on, what's out there, and you listen to what is being preached to these young men, and believe me, these rappers and these rockers, they know that they're the closest thing to a pastor because they said it. I never even came up with that concept. I tell you, this is something I've sat, watched, interviewed, read articles, and these rappers will say, look, we're the closest thing to a preacher that these young men have. They ain't getting close to a sermon except for these musicians. And when you listen to what these musicians are singing, it is diabolical to say if that's the best thing the person's getting to a pastor. Because one thing has been developed, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but one thing has come up in the music industry is this talk of suicide and depression. It has become a big part, and not necessarily talk about it in a positive way, in a sense that to lift the person out of the suicide and depression, but talk about it in an embraced way. As a matter of fact, you think about the two of the last ones that got murdered. I'm not familiar with anything at all. I don't know what the one that got murdered earlier this week sing. I never heard a song of his, so I don't know what he's preaching. All I did when he died, I just looked at his 10 top hits, and I saw the title. The title is like thug rapper and gangster, that type of stuff. I can't even remember the title. It's just looking at the title, I wasn't encouraged, so I didn't go no further. But there's a young man that got mowed down in Florida that I think it's called Extension, his name was. I'll probably get it right, but it's XXX Tension or something like that. Or Extension. You get the point. No, I'd listened to at least 2 or 3 of his after they got mowed down. Because what I quickly realized that all this song that he did has something to do with depression and suicide and stuff like that. It is something that is normal. And he blew up. And that's why it caught my attention, because I was like, wait a minute. If this is the topic of his song, what is he singing about? I went and go read a little bit, and I found out that he himself was dealing with some serious depression and stuff like that. But the young people in our society validated that music and some other artists, I can't remember, because they're singing about depression, and so much of the young people relate to that. And they relate to it in massive numbers. And he's basically I don't say cornered the market, but it seemed like he cornered the market. There's probably other people because I don't listen to that stuff. But he cornered the market, it seems, on singing about depression and suicide and darkness and the devil. So that is an indication to you and I. If you're interested, look it up. It is a clear, not indication instead of social trend, an indicator where our young people is at. That even at 1 in 5 number, it could still be 1 in 5. It could be more, I believe it's more, are dealing with this as young people. That the darkness, the lack of hope talk that we have in the Bible, hope for eternity, hope for the future, hope for a better life, removing that from them and telling them there's no God, they evolve, and just talk to them about their matter, all of that. It is not sowing anything good in the society. I want you to look into this because you might hear me saying this, and you might say, what's the big deal? I'm telling you, there's something about this generation that suicide, violence, depression is something they're very familiar with. It's something that is part of their society and part of their thinking. It's part of their music. You see, I remember when something like rap came up. Rap, they say, is the biggest genre of music. So it's just something you can't really ignore it anymore if you were ignoring it before. It was more songs about lollipop and Adidas and stuff like that. Now people are singing about the devil coming after them. The devil want to take them over. The depression, the suicide. It's gone dark. And it's not just dark, but the young people be loving it. Loving it. They're eating it up. And yet the Bible teaches that immorality is not the key to happiness. Feeding into darkness, going on the dark side, does not make one better. Does not say, oh, accept it because that's who you are. You don't accept that stuff. You don't give into darkness. You don't give into laziness. You don't give into lack of self-control. If you give into it, it will overcome you. It will engulf you with darkness. And it will become, you will become it. And it will become you. That's just the reality. You can't give into that stuff. And it's important. Now notice here in Proverbs 13 verse 14 and 15. Proverbs chapter 13 verse 14 and 15. It says, the law of the wise is a fountain of life. The law of the wise is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death. Good understanding giveth favor, but the way of transgression or transgressor is hard. You see, if you give into something, that becomes your life. If you give into something, that becomes your life. Just think about it. You're singing and praising darkness, and the darkness comes and take your life at a young age. And the fans will validate that, but they're not thinking they continue to feed in darkness, and the darkness is becoming part of their life. Because all that debt and suffering, it become normal. You look at this now, none of these young people want to be in that environment. The black ones don't want to be in the environment where people getting shot every day, and on a regular basis they constantly have to go to funerals. And then when they go to funerals, even violence break out at the funeral. Nobody want to live in that. That's like, living in a war zone. The wise don't want to live in that lifestyle where there's constantly drug overdose, suicide, and this is what you're growing up with as normal. It's constant talk. Your entertainment is depression, darkness, the devil. And so you become ensnared. So this is why I said the law of the wise is a fountain of life. You want to go in a different direction, to depart from the snares of death. So instead of having all around, think about it, the more they sing that music, the more they talk that talk, it's not the more life, it's just more death and the it's, it's like growing, I used to grow up and listen to certain country and western music. Then I realized a large genre in the country music and a large part of country music is to sing about dead people, dogs. I think the dog's dead, women leave, cheat on him, blah, blah. It's just that music is constantly feeding that mindset that the woman's going to leave, the dog is going to die, the father's going to die, the mother's going to die, the grandparents are going to die. And, and then you see the people living and they're not rising above the music. And then you say, wait a second, is the music talking about them, or are they living the way the music talk? And you realize probably both. They're feeding off each other and they're licking each other's wound. We got to get up above that type of stuff. Stop listening to it and rise above that, because all of that is not the way we're supposed to live. That's the way the devil wants us to live. And we don't want to go the way the devil wants us to live. We have to understand this life here is filled with cause and effects. Now, notice Proverbs chapter 26, verse 1, 2, and 3. This very important principle here. I wanted to share this again this morning with you. Proverbs 26, verse 1, 2, and 3. As snow in summer and as rain in harvest, so honor is not seemly for a fool. As the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. A whip for the horse, a bridle for the ass, and a rod for the fool's back. Basically, what all that just said is that, you don't have snow in summer. It just doesn't happen. And you don't have harvest in the middle of, and rain doesn't come in harvest time. It's supposed to be dry. And birds just doesn't get from one place to the other. They have to do it by flying. So when curse comes, it comes with a cause. It's not just, oh, my life is supposed to be a curse. If you have a bunch of people living in a certain environment and they're having it hard, there's a reason why it is that way. It's a cause. You address the cause and get out of the situation. It's not supposed to be normal. It's not supposed to be something to sing about and to glorify. Something to be worked out and get out and fight your way out. If you're depressed, it's not the way it's supposed to be. If you're 30 and you want to be married and you're still not married, that's not the way it's supposed to be. There's a cause to everything in life. You need to find out what the cause is. If you glorify death and destruction and depression, and then it comes and swallow you up in a hail of bullet, the curse causeless shall not come. If you glorify evil and the evil becomes your life, the curse causeless shall not come. It's because you're glorifying something that ought not to be glorified. So a man thinketh, so is he. Christ says we're defiled by the things we say out of our mouth. If we're spitting, as they say in rap, you're spitting darkness, and that darkness come and chase you down with some bullet, it is not without a cause. Even though they might be emotional about it and they cry about it, but that's what the person was spitting. They lived by the spit that they were spitting, and they died by that same spit. When other people were suffering from whatever they were spitting about, they were making money off of it. Now it comes back and it bite them with bullets. This is the reality. And that's just the problem with society. Is how do you tell a young person, if you feed yourself darkness and you start having anxiety and depression and you keep talking that type of way, you might be just suffering from what you're spitting. People they're like, I'm spitting rhymes. No, you're spitting darkness. And that darkness is going to envelop and destroy us. So at that point here, I would just pray. So, if you have a young person around you, I might say, if you have to plead with them, at least you try. Don't be getting, don't let them just get enveloped and taken over by the darkness. If you have to beg with them, at least you try. But just don't watch them being enveloped by darkness, because sometimes we can't imagine how bad it can get. And the reason why is because you want to hope that the people that are around you don't get enveloped to that point where they get destroyed. But what a man sow, that shall he also reap. If you reap darkness and evil, if you sow it, that means you're gonna reap it, and that's just reality. So we to encourage them, look, stop that, because the end result is not good, and we're seeing a show of it right now in the society. They're just being blown away or killing themselves because the darkness becomes overwhelming. And it's either overwhelming where you have too many dark people around you, or you dark and you just kill yourself. It's not good. And that's what we're seeing going on. Let us pray. Thank you, Lord, again for your love and the blessings that you bring in our lives. Thank you for the deliverance that you continue to bring us. And I pray, Lord, that as we continue to try to teach, that you may bless the word, and may the word go to deliver some young person, dear Lord, out of the devil's hand. Be with us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you again live tomorrow morning, where we should talk about wisdom for living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.